So I drive up to my house and I see on the porch this big, huge box. And I'm thinking to myself, what in the world is this thing? I mean, did I order a whiteboard, or I mean, what could this possibly be? And I can take a look at the list. I mean, the address here. Wallabies. Oh, well, that's kind of good. I ordered this 3 months ago, and Wallabies was very apologetic about the delay. I mean, everyone is having supply chain issues, right? And I can see that they're probably having a problem with their box inventory as well. So I open this up to see what in the world they sent me. And this big box had this little bag in here. So this is my long-awaited Wallaby oxygen absorbers and food storage bags. Like I said, it took about 3 months. They're very apologetic. They actually asked me if I wanted to cancel the order and get a refund, or get, I didn't want to if I needed the bags and such, but they did give me 10% back in a refund, so that was nice of them. So we're going to do a test on these bags and oxygen absorbers, and I have to say I was a little bit leery when I first did this order, and I'll tell you why. If you take a look at this bag is awful familiar to the very first video I did on an outfit that was on Amazon. And this is the very first one I did. That company made all these claims about their product that were not truthful. And Wallabies had like the same type of packaging. They have the same little shield over here with the thickness. They have the same little colored thing here. And so it leads me to believe that whoever supplied Amazon with their product that was questionable probably did the same printing for Wallabies. But that doesn't mean Wallabies is bad. But we're going to put it through the paces. So we're going to take a look here and see what we got. So the first thing I thought was kind of strange is they sell their stuff in increments of 60 bags. That's just kind of weird. Usually it's 25, 50, but that's fine. So I got my oxygen absorbers, and they're not all nice and tight in little tight containers, vacuum sealed. And looks like there's 10 to a package. I got my bags, and I got some instructions on how to seal their bags and such. And I also found some interesting stuff on the back of this bag here that shows what's included inside. This is the outer package of the bag that my Wallaby supplies came in. And I found a few things interesting. Is this right here. It says free oxygen absorbers and labels. So I guess what I really did is I just ordered and paid for the 60 food storage bags, and the oxygen absorbers came free. I think that's what they're saying. But another thing that I found interesting is they're calling these food storage bags. They're not saying the Mylar bags or polyester bags. They're only saying food storage bags. So I really don't know what these bags are made out of. Another thing I found interesting is this little shield, and it says 7.5 mils thick. Now I did the testing for these bags, and they are 7.5 mils thick. But what I found really interesting is a while back I did a buyer beware on an outfit on Amazon, and I just found it really interesting that the one that was full of fraud and mistruths, that bag and the Wallaby bag look really familiar. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a really good picture of the one from Amazon, and so the picture from Amazon is kind of dark. But if you take a look at where it shows the mil thickness, it has this exact same shield shape as both of those. the name up in the corner is, the one over on the left is from a company called Full Sill, and then we have the one from Wallaby, and that's almost exactly alike. The description for 60 Mylar bags is almost exactly alike, and all the little warning notices, airtight, moisture proof, light blocking is exactly the same. So without knowing for sure, I would say that the Full Sill bags and the Wallaby bags came from the same manufacturing, because there's just too many coincidences to say that it's not. On the back of the bag is some little verbiage here, and it kind of goes through and shows what's there. But also, once again, they just say about the bags that they're BPA free and FDA certified food grade materials. They're not saying polyester, they're not saying Mylar. So once again, I don't know what the material really is. This is a card that came in the bag, and this kind of says, welcome Wallabies, and it has the co-founders and some other things. It has instructions and how long food can stay. So it's pretty generic instructions. This next picture right here is actually the little packet that the oxygen absorbers come in, and there's 10 to a packet, and it says right on there the size is 400 cc. I found that interesting because traditionally the gallon size oxygen absorbers for a gallon bag is 300 cc's, and this is 400 cc's, but yet they are smaller than the 300 cc. Now, I'm not sure if they're trying to pull a fast one or not, but I kind of find this a little bit disingenuous that this was made by production team number 4 and tested by team number 1, and it has this little seal that was passed. And so it'd be interesting if anyone else out there has the exact same numbers and the same kind of label here as I have. I think that's just something to make you feel good about yourself. So I'm not sure how truthful that label is. Now this is the website from the Better Business Bureau. Wallabies has an A- rating, which is still pretty good. The highest rating from the BBB is an A+ rating. And so you can take a look here. Has information on Wallabies, the customer reviews. The second is a little bit interesting. Wallabies has been in business since 2021, so it's a relatively new company. And I guess at the time it was registered, they only had 2 employees, and it's located in California. And I wish I could remember the email I received from them, but I did ask them, well, why are you called Wallabies? And you kind of it sounds like you're from Australia, but I don't know what the relationship is. But the alternative business name is Sunshine Foods Limited Liability Corporation, and that's out of California also. Now, on their website, they do have this little thing here. So the bag, the Wallabies bag, does not say anything about Mylar, but the website says that they are Mylar bags. And so I don't know what to believe now, because the package says one thing, the website says something else. So that's just a little bit confusing. This is the Msds sheet. The new name is supposed to be an SDS sheet. So the manufacturer in China making this sheet for the American markets is out of date. But anyway, when I received this sheet from Wallabies, they asked me if I'd blur out the manufacturer's name, because they say they have a special relationship with them, and okay, that's fine, I'll blur it out. But I just want to make a little note here. If you purchase any chemicals within the United States and its territories, you have every right as a consumer to ask for and receive an SDS sheet. They used to be called Msds sheets. And this is required by law, and OSHA is the governing authority over this. So It took me a long time to get the SDS sheet or the Msds sheet from Wallaby's, but this is it. The picture on the left is the cover sheet, and you can definitely see this is made in China. The over on the right is what I'm most interested in, and you can see that it has iron powder, 70% activated carbon, 5%, I hate saying this word, dirt at 10%, sodium chloride at 5%, and water at 10%. So those are the elements that I actually tested on the oxygen absorber, and it just basically gives you an idea of what to look for. These are the oxygen absorbers from Wallaby's. So it is time to dissect one of these and see what's going on. Now, according to the package on the label on the front, these say that these are 400 cc oxygen absorbers. But my only concern is these are quite a bit smaller. So we're going to open these up and see what's inside. According to the Msds, we should have, they say 70% is iron powder, 5% activated carbon, 10% diatomaceous earth, which is dirt, and then 5% sodium chloride, which is salt. And the interesting thing is they say 10% water is in this. So that's going to be interesting. So we just want to check the scale, and that is accurate at 1 gram. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this guy. I'd like to be optimistic, but this is a really small oxygen absorber. So the contents on this is 4 grams. Well, it's flashing back between 3 and 4 grams, so the threshold is pretty low. So we're going to spread this out so we can get and separate the elements from the iron, so we can see exactly how much iron powder is going to be in this thing. There's so very little chemical here, it's not even registering, so that's about less than a gram. We want to send this through at least a couple of times. We're coming up with, it's right on the threshold between 2 and 3 grams. It's having a hard time making up its mind on what it wants to be. So I'm just going to let this sit here for a second. Okay, it looks like it's 2 grams. So we're going to call it 2 grams of iron powder. If that's the case, then we need to have, this has to be around 2 grams. Okay, we have 1 gram of secondary ingredients. So now it's up to about 3 grams. So we're going to give it the benefit of the doubt and call it 3 grams of iron powder. And then we have 1 gram of secondary ingredients and then the package. So we're back to 4 grams. Okay, so with 3 grams of iron powder, and if each gram can absorb 300 cubic centimeters, that means this oxygen absorber has a potential, not guaranteed, has the potential of absorbing 900 cc's, and they're rating this at 400 cc's. Now the issue here is how exposed is this iron powder has been to the atmosphere from the time it was mined out of the ground to the time it was packaged. How much contamination did this go through? That's the unknown that we don't know about. So the potential is there, but it's not guaranteed. Now the manufacturer is saying that this is rated to 400 cc's, which would be basically 1.25 grams of iron powder. So the iron powder amount exceeds what it should be, but how contaminated could it be? So we're going to continue on with the test and see what happens. We're going to move on to the testing of the bag. This seems to be like a standard bag. Now, it does not say on the package if it is truly a mylar bag. It could just be a polyester bag, and that's fine. Taking a quick look at it, it looks like it has a gusseted bottom here, and it has the tear strip tabs across here, and also has the little zip lock inside here. So, pretty standard. So we're going to take a look and see what the thickness of this bag is. I took 40 readings and the average comes out to be 7.8. And according to the bag, they say it's 7.5. So they're good on their thickness of their bags. We're getting ready to do the test on the Wallaby oxygen absorber. I got my jar. Now this jar was 952 cc's, times that by 0.21. Comes out just about 202 cc's, but I do just have a 200 cc mark right here. So this is 21% of the jar. And I have my Wallaby oxygen absorbers right here. Now the first thing I've noticed with these is how tiny they are. So this is a Wallaby 400 cc oxygen absorber. This is a standard 300 cc oxygen absorber, so you can see that the 300 is much larger and thicker than the Wallaby 400. So we're going to put this to the test and see what it does. So this is my Wallaby oxygen absorber with some duct tape, and this is Gorilla duct tape. It's the only one I could use that doesn't fall apart after a while. So we're going to get my little tool here, and we're going to thread this through the jar here, put it down on the bottom, tap it in place, and we're ready for the test. So this jar has the 400 cc Wallaby oxygen absorber. This is my control jar. It doesn't have an oxygen absorber in it. It's basically there to see if there's any influence of temperature and barometric pressure on this test. If this does nothing, that tells me that there's no influence upon this test. So it's just a control to see how fair the test is going to be. We're 12 hours into this, and there's just barely a noticeable film on our control. But over here, we're only about halfway up. We've only sucked up about 100 cc's of fluid. So this absorber is really taking its time. It's been 24 hours for the Wallaby oxygen absorber to get up to this point. And I'm just going to go ahead and mark it here. It's been to that point for several hours and has not increased. And so I'm going to go ahead and dump this now. I have a point there where I can mark the capacity, and I have a feeling this may not absorb much more. We're at 63 hours with the Wallaby experiment, and the level is way down here. Now, we dumped it earlier when the level was up here, but this is just struggling to pick up any water, which is the same as having this absorber up here absorb oxygen to make a void. When the first Wallaby oxygen absorber test failed to really give forth some good results, I went ahead and did a second test with a second oxygen absorber. After 36 hours, this second one actually came up to the line for 200 cc's. So we're going to go ahead and dump this one and exchange there and continue the test on that. The first Wallaby test, which I thought stalled, is actually making some progress, but it's really taken its time. It has increased a little bit, so we'll let this continue to see how far it will go. This test is in its 85th hour. The Wallaby's oxygen absorber is now in for 124 hours, and it's not doing really well, and it hasn't really moved. So I'm going to be calling this. Now, I dumped this once before, and I'm going to dump it one more time, but I need to come in here and mark the water level here, right there. So this is going to get dumped here. So the first time I dumped it was right here, and I just dumped it right here. So I will fill this back up to these levels to calculate how many cc's. Now, to do 21% of oxygen, which would be 200 cc's, would be this mark right here. It never made it to that mark. So this test has been going on for 78 hours, and it has not even got to this other point. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to mark it. And I'm going to dump it. So on this test, my first dump on the Wallaby absorber, it never reached this top mark, which is going to be 200 cc's. It only reached this mark right here, and then I just dumped it at that mark right there. So I will calculate to see how many cc's that is. The control for this test really did not bring in hardly any noticeable fluid, but I will try to mark it, but it's probably about 3 millimeters from the bottom. So it's going to be hard for me to mark that because that level is actually underwater. First Wallaby dump on my first test came up to this mark right here. So we'll see how much that came out to be. .171 cc's. The last dump on the Wallaby first test came to this little mark right down here, that little black speck. And that came to 72 cc's. This is the mark on the first dump that I performed. So we're going to figure out how much that is. The first dump on Wallabies came to 134. My second dump on the Wallaby absorber is way down here, so we'll measure how much that is. The Wallaby second dump came up to 87 cc's. On the Wallaby's oxygen absorber, my original test number 1, after 124 hours, picked up 243 cc's. Halfway through this test, I was concerned about how it was performing, so I went ahead and did a second test. On the second test, after 78 hours, it picked up 221 cc's. The package said that these cc's were rated at 400 cc's. Now there is one issue about Wallaby's oxygen absorbers. I performed these tests on only 2 out of probably millions and millions of oxygen absorbers. To really get an equal statistical model, I'd have to perform probably hundreds of tests to see how these really went. My original concern with the Wallaby oxygen absorber was their size. These absorbers are probably one of the smallest absorbers I've seen, and these are supposed to be rated at 400 cc's, and they weigh less and are in smaller size than their 300 cc counterparts, so that has me concerned. The reason I performed these tests of oxygen absorbers and mylar bags, or polyester bags for that matter, is to educate those individuals who put up food storage, who are freeze dryers and preppers, so they can make an educated decision on where they want to spend their money. This is the Wallaby 400 cc oxygen absorber. To put that into perspective, this jar contains 400 cc's of liquid. The first test I conducted with the Wallaby oxygen absorber took 124 hours and was able to absorb 243 cc's. The second test for 78 hours took up 221 cc's. So you can tell that through my test, both of the Wallaby oxygen absorbers fell short from what it was rated. I hope this video doesn't leave anyone with angst or any anxiety. That was not my intention. But if you're concerned about your food storage, where you may have used a Wallaby oxygen absorber and you don't feel comfortable with that, there's a few things you can do. Well, one thing you can do is do nothing. The Wallaby oxygen absorber still did suck up a certain amount of oxygen, but it didn't get to the point of where it was rated at 400 cc's. If you're using the gallon bags or the 1-quart jars, and if you vented all the air out before you sealed them, there's a good chance that the Wallaby oxygen absorber will be just fine. And over time, because it does seem like it takes a long time for the Wallaby oxygen absorber to work properly. So what to do now would be nothing. You may still be okay, but if you feel concerned, here's some suggestions. You can open up one of your bags of food that has a Wallaby absorber and check it. See if it's the little teeny absorber or a larger absorber. There's a good chance that maybe prior to the supply chain issue, Wallaby was sending out larger absorbers and maybe they had to fall back to a different brand to fill their orders. You can take your Wallaby packaged foods and move it up, consume the foods sooner than later, and that way you won't find a surprise, say 15, 20 years down the road. You can go ahead, and if you can identify the oxygen absorbers from Wallaby, just go ahead, open up your food, repackage it, or your bottles. That's a good thing with those who put it in bottles. you might be able to identify the Wallaby oxygen absorber through a glass jar better than in a Mylar bag. But you can just go ahead and put a new absorber in from a company that you trust. The other thing you can do is you can vacuum pack your food. I have a video on YouTube for hints and tips #2 that show how you can vacuum pack your food. You can just snip off a corner, make a vent hole, suck out any air that might be in it, and go ahead and seal it. You can also do this with jars. That way, in case there is some oxygen still left in your jars or bags with a Wallaby absorber, you can vent the atmosphere by vacuum packing. So I hope this leaves you well. I hope I did not upset you. That was not my intention, but we need to make sure that our food supplies are going to be safe and usable in the future. But I wish you all the best.